Emily Carter had always believed Christmas held a special kind of magic, even for adults who pretended they were too busy to feel it. But this year, as she sat alone in a small cafe in the snowy outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona, that belief felt fragile. The cafe lights reflected softly against the frosted windows, and cheerful holiday music played in the background, but none of it reached her heart. She had agreed to a blind date, hoping to break the cycle of lonely holidays. Instead, she found herself waiting alone, fingers cold against her coffee cup, unaware that her night was about to take a far more unexpected turn. When the door finally swung open, she lifted her head with a spark of hope, only for it to die instantly. The man took one look at her, barely offering a polite smile. "You're not my type," he muttered, as if she were a disappointing item on a menu instead of a human being who had built up the courage to show up. He didn't sit, didn't explain, didn't try to soften the blow. He simply turned and walked out. Emily sat frozen for a long moment, embarrassment heating her face more than the untouched coffee ever could. Once she gathered herself, she stepped outside into the biting winter wind. The cold night air stung her cheeks as she walked to her car, but she welcomed the sharpness, it distracted her from the sting of rejection. Snowflakes drifted lazily across the road as she drove through the pine-lined mountain route that led to her cabin. The headlights cut through the white haze, illuminating the quiet wilderness. She tried to tell herself it wasn't a big deal, that bad dates happened, that she'd laugh about it later. But her heart felt heavy. As she rounded a bend, something on the forest floor caught her eye, a small, motionless shape curled near a fallen log, barely visible under the snow. She slowed the car, squinting through the windshield. Instinct urged her to keep going. This was the kind of night when temperatures could drop dangerously low, but something deeper tugged at her. Emily pulled over, hazard lights blinking in the darkness, and stepped cautiously out into the snow. The closer she got, the clearer the shape became. It wasn't a stray animal, as she had first thought. It was a child. A tiny boy, no older than 7, shivering violently, his clothes torn and soaked from the snow. Her breath caught in her throat. He looked as though he had been out there far too long. Without hesitation, Emily knelt beside him, ignoring the cold seeping through her jeans. She gently wrapped her coat around his trembling body, feeling his ribs through the thin fabric of his shirt. "Don't worry, you're safe now," she whispered, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. His eyes fluttered open for a brief second, dark, frightened, and exhausted. She scooped him up, surprised by how light he was, and hurried back to the car. Once inside, she cranked up the heat, cradling him close while her heart pounded with fear and protectiveness she didn't fully understand. The drive home felt endless, every second heavy with worry. She kept glancing at the boy to make sure he was still breathing, whispering soft reassurances even though he remained silent. When they finally reached her cabin, she carried him inside, setting him gently onto the couch and wrapping him in blankets. She warmed soup, lifting small spoonfuls to his lips until he was able to swallow. His breathing steadied. His shaking eased. Emily stayed by his side through that long, quiet Christmas night, unsure of who he was or where he came from, but knowing one thing for certain, finding him was no accident. As dawn approached, painting soft orange light across the snow outside her windows, Emily watched the sleeping child with a mixture of fear, compassion, and unexplainable connection. Her heartache from earlier felt distant, almost insignificant compared to the fragile life resting under her care. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, questions, authorities, complications, but she knew she would face it all. Because in the dark silence of the forest, on a night she thought would break her spirit, fate had led her to someone who needed her more than she had ever needed anyone. And that small act of kindness would change everything. 4 days passed quietly inside Emily's little cabin tucked against the edge of the snowy Arizona forest. The boy had begun recovering, slowly but steadily. At first he barely spoke, only watching her with cautious, wide eyes. But as the days went by, he started eating full meals, sleeping peacefully, and clinging to Emily with a trust that felt both heartwarming and heartbreaking. She had no idea where he came from, only that he was Apache and far too young to have survived alone in the woods. Emily had called local authorities, hospitals, and even volunteer search networks, but no one knew of a missing child. Despite the uncertainty, she didn't regret bringing him home. There was something about the quiet way he held her fingers when he was scared or the way he leaned against her when he was tired, something that made her feel protective in a way she had never experienced. Christmas had passed strangely, with no gifts or decorations, but somehow more meaningful than any holiday before. Still, a small worry lingered in her chest. Someone must be searching for this boy. Someone must be desperate to find him. And each day that passed without a call or visit made the silence heavier. On the fourth evening, as soft snow fell against her porch, Emily was stirring warm stew in the kitchen when it happened. A sudden, thunderous, boom, 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 shook the entire cabin door. The sound was so forceful that she jumped, nearly dropping the spoon. The boy froze where he sat, eyes widening with both fear and recognition. Emily's heartbeat quickened. Visitors were rare out here, especially in the winter. She wiped her palms on a towel, took a steadying breath, and opened the door, expecting maybe an officer, or a lost traveler. Instead, what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Standing on her snow-dusted porch were three Apache women, wrapped in traditional blankets and winter layers, their faces exhausted yet burning with emotion. Snowflakes clung to their braids and shoulders. For a long heartbeat, Emily couldn't speak. The women looked like they had been searching for days without stopping, eyes red from cold and worry. The eldest stepped forward, her expression wavering between desperation and hope. She held out a trembling hand, her voice rough with sleepless nights as she spoke. "We were told our boy might be here," she said softly. "We've been searching day and night, praying for a sign." Before Emily could respond, the boy darted past her and ran straight into the women's arms, burying his face against them. A cry of pure relief broke from the eldest woman as she wrapped him tightly, then kissed the top of his head. The other two women embraced him too, murmuring words Emily couldn't understand but felt deeply. The sight hit her harder than she expected, a wave of relief, joy, and sudden emptiness crashing together. She had grown attached to the child in just 4 days, and now she watched as he returned to the family who loved him. It was beautiful, and unexpectedly painful. When the emotions settled, the eldest woman stepped back toward Emily and gently took her hands. Her fingers were rough from the cold, but her touch was warm with gratitude. "You saved one of our own," she said with deep sincerity. "We will never forget this kindness. You came to
him when the world turned its back." Her eyes softened, studying Emily with an intensity that felt almost prophetic. "And your life is about to change in ways you cannot imagine." Emily stood frozen in the crisp winter air, unable to respond before the women began guiding the boy back toward the trees. As they disappeared into the silent snowfall, Emily remained on the porch long after the cold seeped through her sweater. The night was quiet again, but her heart wasn't. She watched the place where they had vanished, replaying the woman's words over and over. When she finally stepped inside, the cabin felt different, emptier, yet strangely full of something she couldn't name. The Christmas she thought had been ruined by rejection had instead led her to a moment of purpose, connection, and destiny. Standing in the dim golden light of her living room, Emily understood one thing clearly. Her story wasn't closing, it was only beginning.